Call the meeting into order. Thank you all for being here today on this beautiful sunny Thursday morning. I do have to read off a couple of things now that we are doing in-person meetings as well as Zoom meetings. So members of the public can participate in the meeting by attending in person from the Mayor's Conference Room, which is this one, Santa Rosa City Hall, Room 10. It is recommended that social distancing be observed, or via Zoom webinar by visiting, srcd.org, .zoom.us /J/84481488-731, or by dialing 877-853-5257 and entering webinar ID 844-8148-8731. Please, Vanessa, repeat that.
Can you repeat that?
Very confidential. All right, so the recording secretary will now take roll. And by the way, member Pace is no longer participating on the advisory board. So I just wanted to point that out.
All right, call to order and roll call. Board Member Anderson.
Present.
Board Member Pace. Board Member Renteria. Board Member Rumble.
Here.
Chair Rivero.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all members, with the exception of Board Members Pace and Board Members Renteria, are present.
Thank you. All right, moving on to public comments. This is a time when any person may address matters not listed on the agenda, but which are within the subject matter of the jurisdiction. The public may comment on agenda items when the item is called. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. So now, Lonnie, can you please review how the public may comment, or Kaya?
Yes, if any member of the public has any questions in person, please raise your hands. If any members of the public are joining us via Zoom, they may raise their hand, or if you're calling in via phone, press *9.
I sort of realized that little hair I have when I came up on the profile view.
Backlight for you.
It's a backlight, that's what's making it happen.
Yeah.
It's actually not hair loss.
Not true.
Does that show my weight too? Like the
That's totally what it is.
backlight makes me lose hair and gain 20 pounds.
Chair Rivero,
You are right.
there are no hands raised from the public.
All right, thank you.
Except for me here.
There's
yeah.
one.
Yeah, but
In
not
person.
on Zoom though,
One-
apparently. Yeah,
one person
thank
in
you. Cool.
public.
It's nice. This is Eric Frazier and I'm a resident of Santa Rosa. It's nice to see you all in person again. Thank you very much. I did want to use, now that I've sort of reconciled my comments with the agenda, because I think some of what I have to report out applies to some agenda items. But of course, overall, the perspective I usually bring into this room has to do with short-term rentals. And there's been a lot going on in the regulatory environment with short-term rentals, including, of course, a robust regulations and permits issued and processes and so on and so forth. I've long maintained that short-term rentals should have seats on this board, and that the funds that are raised for the BIA as well as the TOT from short-term rentals be properly accounted for and have proper oversight. That hasn't occurred yet, and in the winds are some legal actions concerning the appropriateness of BIA as attached to residential addresses under the formation of the state law where it came from, and other questions about accountability. But it does appear, though, just sort of as a summary of what's going on, that there's just a few under 200 permits for what's called non-hosted short-term rentals. And so those are autonomously managed short-term rental opportunities. They're not like hotels because they don't have the same level of occupancy, and there's other, they pivot frequently to longer term uses. But those that have permits look like, as is the case in the county as well, that there's no further regulations that are going to preclude their operations. Except of course for regulations over how they carry about their affairs, noise and what have you. But those are already pretty well articulated under city ordinances. So the writing on the wall is pretty clear that inventory of some 500 rooms, of course, with an occupancy that's well under 50%, again, because a lot of these places pivot to uses that the owner dictates, family visits, as well as long and midterm uses, especially key in emergencies, by the way, and evacuations, as research will bear out. But it's time to reckon with the wants and needs of that group of people. And we do appreciate some of the affiliated organizations that have been adversarial to short-term rentals, changing their positions to understand that their support is more important for the good of the local economy, as well as just people's state of mind. And on a personal note, I hope that these discussions in the public space over short-term rentals can turn the corner to where we can just sort of reckon with true conflict that happens in our neighborhood and not try to create conflict where it doesn't exist. So we can get to the brass tacks of making sure that everybody's quality of life is elevated by the experiences that they seek here in the county. So thanks, but there's other things that pertain specifically to agenda items, so I'll be back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fraser. All right, moving on to item 3 on the agenda, approval of minutes. We haven't met for a while and we had quite a few meetings at the end of the last year. So item 3.1, minutes from the September 22nd, 2022 have been distributed for your review. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Okay, maybe there's not. I'll move on to item 3.2. Minutes from the September 26, 2022 meeting have also been distributed for your review. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Okay, there's none. Item 3.3, minutes for the November 16, 2022 meeting have been distributed for your review. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Okay, so now there's none. I'll move on to item 4.4, approval of board members.
Wait,
So,
to approve the minutes.
Yeah,
oh,
you might want to call a vote.
Yeah.
So after speaking with our assistant city attorney, we don't need to take a vote on the minutes.
Oh,
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, I sent it via email, but now here for the record, we don't need to take a vote on minutes anymore. And we also don't need a quorum for minutes either.
okay.
So whoever was at those meetings, if you're like in agreement that we can move forward with approval, then we could do that.
and if there aren't any minutes,
And then if there are no minutes, then we'll just.
amendments.
Yeah, if there's no amendments, then you could just say approve as submitted, for the following dates.
Okay.
So Chair Rivero, I'll leave it to you to close the loop on that and say, approved, these minutes are approved as submitted for these dates.
Okay, so these minutes are approved for the September 22nd, 2022 meeting and September 26, 2022 meeting, as well as for the minutes for November 16, 2022. Thank you. All right, so moving on to item 4, approval of board members. So at the beginning, when we're about to take roll call, I mentioned that member Pace is no longer serving on the advisory board. He's moved on to, he's still with the Hotel E, but he's going to be concentrating on some other activities. So this calls for 4.1, approval of submission of new board members to the city council for appointment. So the advisory board So just some background and the advisory board is comprised of one Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce employee, which is the chief executive officer, which is Peter Rumble, one city employee, program specialist Rafael Rivero, and three Santa Rosa lodging operators, at least one of whom is employed by a full service hotel. So that position is now vacant since Tony Pace, as I said, will remain with Hotel E, but is moving on to some other activities. And one of whom is employed by a selective service hotel, which is Donna Renteria, unfortunately not here today. The remaining representatives may be employed by either a full service or select service lodging operation, and that is Todd Anderson. Good to see you, Todd. So in addition, there are two alternatives to the city and chamber representatives. The art and culture manager, Tara Thompson, for the city. And we now have Janelle Myers, Visit Santa Rosa program representative. Those are alternate to Peter Rumble. Staff will present the recommended appointee to the city, to the Santa Rosa Tourism Business Improvement Area Advisory Board as follows. Hugh Futrell, the representative and owner and operator of Hotel E, to serve as a representative for full service hotels. So are there any questions from the board about this request? Okay, seeing that there's none. Before a motion is made, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on item 4.1?
Well, of course. And this does get to the heart of the matter when it comes to, sorry.
Give us a moment
Oh,
to
sure.
put up the comment
course.
timer.
I'll take my prompts from you. Thanks.
And again, once we get the comment started, can you state your name for the record?
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Okay, thanks. So my name's Eric Frazier and my address is truthinTourism@gmail.com. And so this item does go to the heart of what this committee does. And obviously there's a huge segment of people contributing to the BIA that don't have representation on the BIA board. And that's ridiculous in so many ways. And has been since the inception of this board. So it's now noted that my objection again is on that issue, and we'll be pushing for a resolution for that because obviously just bringing up an objection time and time again is just being stuck in the snow. So we will find a solution. And then also, I think for the record, Hugh Futrell, of course, is a great guy, civic leader, probably our preeminent developer. His ownership extends beyond Hotel E. It includes the Art House, I believe, and other tax-paying entities, lodging entities. Is it just that too? Others have a question about that. And there's questions about how the Art House is constructed and operated as far as an entity and whether they should apply to the STR regulations or what exactly happened to the condominiums plan there. But yeah, he's a great guy. So not that I have a vote, but that's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
When it comes to timing, how do I just sort of
Well, I can let you know if you go
Okay,
over.
thank you.
There's also a big clock behind you.
Oh, thanks, Peter.
And Mr. Futrell will be, I think, we send the application. I need to follow up to see where the application is. But the recommendation also from the city clerk's office is to actually, they haven't done this in a while, so they're recommending that the board does go through ethics training and sexual harassment training. So we'll be addressing those at our next meeting and hopefully getting some times available. So members can participate in those trainings and get those items checked off, since it's probably been a while since you've done any of those. So, all right, so.
Raphael, we're gonna ask for comments on Zoom as well. We have a couple
Yeah.
of people. in-
Oh, yeah, okay, perfect.
If there are any questions or comments from the public, and you're on Zoom, you may raise your hand using the function in Zoom. If you are calling in, press *9. Chair Rivera, there are no public comments from Zoom.
Thank you very much, Kaya. All right, so that leads me to this point. Does anyone wish to make a motion in support of the approval of the new member for recommendation to the city council?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? The recording secretary will now take a roll call vote.
All right, for the roll call vote, Board Member Anderson,
Aye.
Board Member Pace, Board Member Renteria, Board Member Rumble,
Aye.
Chair Rivera.
Aye.
Thank you.
And for the record, board member Pace is no longer participating in the advisory board.
Oh, I apologize.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, schedule items. And for this particular topic, we're going to be leading a discussion. And here with us, present this morning is Rosa de la Rosa, Deputy Director for our Economic Development Division. So good to see you, Rosa. Welcome. So item 5.1, Board Ordinance and City Policy Alignment. Updates, clarification, and discussion of board roles, responsibilities, and processes associated with and in compliance with the formation ordinance, and related city policies. And again, it's a discussion, and we're going to be referencing ordinance number 3946. And in addition to that, City Council policy number 000-06.
Do you have a copy of that other part? I have that.
I just have my own copy. I can give you that one. It's from, I think there's been a couple of revisions.
I think that's the latest one. I think the revisions are noted in the back.
Okay. And we can go ahead and add it to, I don't know if we add it to the agenda later, but
We can load it later, yeah.
you can just,
You know,
Raisa may have
Yeah, I
a
have
copy. Yeah, so basically, we want to revisit the policy and the responsibilities and things that we need to adhere to as members of the advisory board. And I don't know if this is the time, so when you chime in, but
Sure, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I can just start on this. So, I just wanted to start with, and Raphael talked about it, that everybody has to have an application in, and I think you've all been, I think you all do. But if anybody doesn't, moving forward, we need to do that. And the thing that's interesting about having the application in is, or about this board in particular, so we adhere to the ordinance. The ordinance refers to policy 006. And the thing that's interesting about that is it talks about, policy 006 is the council policy that talks about appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. And it talks a lot about board members who are appointed by individual council members. And then there's a section that talks about board and committee members who are appointed by the full council. That is this board. However, it is not listed in the policy. So we need to get some clarification with our city attorney's office. What are some of the things that do we adhere to because it's not clear? And I think moving forward, that might help us in the future if there's any question really about appointments. The second thing that I want to say is that the ordinance itself dictates, who serves on the board and other terms, et cetera. So we know there's one chamber staff which is called out in the ordinance is acceptable, even though it would not and one city staff. What's called out in the ordinance is that in the policy, it would not normally be acceptable for a city staff person to be on a board or commission. So the ordinance specifically addresses that. And then there's 3 hotel operators, and it very specifically says hotel operators, at least one of which is a full service operator and one is a select service operator. I'll get back to any changes, if there are ever any desired changes to the ordinance, that change has to be made by ordinance. And it would be a discussion of this board. So at any time, we can say, hey, look, elements of the ordinance aren't working. It's easier because ordinance changes are a bit laborious to kind of gather them, discuss them, and then make one change at one time.
And by the way, sorry, Rosa, that's in section 6-56.400 on the in the ordinance.
So the other thing is in the ordinance, I think in the past, we'd always assumed it's a GM or it's a this or that, right? But there is actually nothing in the ordinance that states at what level of the organization somebody needs to be represented, or the organization itself needs to be represented. But it is interesting when you look at policy 006, and I think this is something that we had not previously been asking, is that we need to confirm that people are residents of Santa Rosa. They are registered to vote. No comments on if you vote or not, though I think you should. And again, have that application form in. So if we're considering anybody in the future, that is one of the things that we're going to have to confirm. And part of the policy that I want to check on, because it doesn't specifically relate to because we're not listed as one of the boards that's appointed by the full council, is what are requirements to actually post openings on the board. There are requirements generally, whether you're appointed by an individual or by the full council. This is a very limited scope assessment. Does it matter? So do we need to do that, 1? And then 2, if we do, is there a consideration of exception? It's probably something we should discuss for us to recommend, because in the end, it's what our actions end up being, we're an advisory body to the council. And so I think the council will in the end be the one that's voting on any changes or clarifications in either the council policy or in the ordinance. The other thing that, is interesting when you're looking at the council appointment policy is there are, in any other board that's appointed by a single council member, there are term limits and they're associated with that. It is different. Again, we run into that thing like at what point do we adhere to it? But if there is an interest of this board, which has not been an issue. We've had turnover, particularly with I think Tony replaced somebody. I think you're the constant, you knew two of the constants, right? Yeah. So if there's a question or an interest of having term limits or something, that is something that can be discussed, but that is something, again, that would be part of an ordinance change. We might be able to do something like a clarification if it's just term limits and putting that in a resolution that's attached to the ordinance. There might be some alternatives to that because it's not a substantial change to this, or we could make that clarification within the council policy. And then the other thing that we were looking at, it just slipped out of my mind, so I'll come back to that. I know what it was. It was the chair position. I don't know what it was before. I know that I think I inherited something from Danielle. I thought at one point you were chair, Raphael's been chair. But the interesting thing about that is the chair is actually appointed by the mayor per policy regardless. And so we can recommend a chair. and ask the mayor to do that. But it is interesting that we have not had that sort of formal piece of it. Not that you have not been doing a good job. I just want to point out that is something that we noted when we were, really digging deeper into some of the policies and asking why we've been doing certain things for so long. And it could just be that at that time, a city staff person was appointed and it has not been discussed or questioned. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out, appointment of chair, changes by ordinance. Well, let's stop there because I don't, I know there's something else, is by ordinance. So we had been meeting at one point every month and then we moved it to every other month. The ordinance only dictates quarterly or as needed. So we're required to have 4 meetings a year or as needed. So, again, it's not that if there's nothing going on that's different, or that's urgent, then we can sort of set what our time is. And, in speaking about that, we thought similar to other boards and commissions, it's always helpful to have some standing items, beyond the minutes kind of things, but like an update from Visit Santa Rosa, or whatever other things. And then otherwise we sort of identified the timeline based on reporting requirements for, review and discussion of the annual report. And then another meeting will be approval of the annual report, and budget review. Can we get the budget review to coincide with your budget review? Ours is standard. We get told what we're going to do by council. It doesn't matter. We're on off cycles, but it would be helpful to have that discussion in preparation for your budget. And then that then informs ours when we start our process in March, April, May, by the time it gets, which is as early as we started for the June approval. I think if we have any thoughts or discussions about that, and I know there's something else, but I'll get that.
Wasn't that important?
It was probably the most important thing. Anyway, yeah, so I don't know, thoughts, discussions?
I think generally, checking ourselves back to what the intent is a good idea, and none of what we might need to adjust seems to be, significantly profound or major alteration needed. So some adjustments here and there, I think they're fine.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as we move back into in-person, I did note, and this has never been a problem for this board, but I just want to state it. There is an attendance requirement of 75% of the required meetings. That would be 3 of the 4 meetings, folks. So we've been good even when it was 12 meetings.
Yeah, everybody has, including Donna.
Including Donna, yeah. I think we're being, asked and frankly required to really check ourselves with our meetings. And I don't think this has been a problematic one. You do live in Santa Rosa, don't you? That's what I thought. I recall that during the fires.
Right, yeah, missed it by that much.
By that much.
2 blocks from my house. So I think we all need to start calling and emailing the mayor to tell him to appoint Raphael.
Well, we can just
Start a robo email campaign.
exactly.
So that's really the biggest clarification, right? That I think, or the most impactful one is, if the city attorney says that there needs to be direct appointments, then we're gonna need to, affirm the positions via appointment and go through whatever process that takes, but.
And the thing that's interesting is the policy does say that you can have a waiver of these things, which, it could be is what happened back before you and I and maybe you, I don't even remember, were on, is that, it could be that they decided to waive that piece of it, given the limited number of people who are eligible.
So you're right, the waiver would be a good idea, just because of turnover in hotel representations,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Don and Todd aside, right, we've had some rotation.
Basically once a year.
So,
We're a transient bunch.
Yeah.
so, so if a replacement would necessarily require appointment, that could be a time-consuming process.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Just on a staff side of getting all the paperwork together, taking the action to the council.
So I think what we can do then is just go back and confirm, nobody is here when this thing I was here, but I was not at all a part of it. So I don't think there's any recollection of waiver.
Yeah.
So I can just go back and confirm that as part of the confirmation with the policy anyway.
The other issue around term limits, I would have the same sort of reservation about that, just in the sense of
It's a limited pool.
it's a limited pool. And so I'm not sure that would be the best solution.
Right. Yeah.
Or a needed solution.
That's everything.
Mhm.
I need to apply as an alternate.
No, we're assuming that anything that comes on this is the recommendation of the board is good.
A good question. Since this was just a discussion, we don't need to take a motion, but we do.
I understand your question and the answer is no, because he's got his application
Yeah.
and he's good and it's a designated assignment, but still no. Yeah.
Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on item, what's that, 4.1?
If there are any members of the public in person, please raise your hand. And we have one member of the public in person for comments.
Okay, thank you. Eric Frazier again, truthandtourism@gmail.com. Obviously, you're ignoring the most important item. And Ray's, I don't know how it slipped your mind, but that would be the influence of STRs in the collection of BIA and of being omitted from this board. It's obvious. There's no shortage of residents of Santa Rosa that could be called into service on this board to oversee the BIA money. The fact that that group of people has been ignored has been a travesty. This gives us a great opportunity to fix that. I'd also like to call attention as to why a Chamber of Commerce employee sits on the board. Aren't they a contractor of the BIA? They're not a government organization. They're not a hotel. They're the contractor. They hold the contract for administering BIA money through Visit Santa Rosa. That's it. They're not politically elected. They may, in fact, operate as a quasi-government organization, but that's a different scenario. What we're talking about is fair representation that protects the taxpayers' money, that according to council policy, encourages participation of all citizens. And that's not what's happening here. So I find it very interesting, fortuitous even, that now the SEAM has been opened to examine the civil rights aspects of this ordinance that are way out of whack. Get those corrected, potentially with the council involved or legal or both. So I would say because this is in motion legally, then what date are we meeting just to go over these issues so to make sure that we're avoiding litigation? I'm not an attorney, but obviously now would be a good time for a litigated response for all the defects in the BIA program. So that's pretty fascinating, quite frankly. Because make no mistake, the way that this ordinance was first constructed, it severely damages the civil rights of many parties, and is not, has a lot of flaws. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak to the defects legally, but it doesn't feel right, doesn't look right. It's a source of conflict, unnecessary conflict. It avoids accountability and oversight over finances. Bear in mind that the BIA is a bifurcated entity. There's millions of dollars that go to the Chamber of Commerce, it's principal source of income, okay, and then also to the city. Thank you. Try to address it, people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are any further comments via Zoom or phone, please raise your hand using in Zoom, or if you're calling via phone, press *9. Chair Rivera, there are no questions via Zoom or phone.
Thank you, Kyle.
Quickly, Chair, just opinions about civil rights aside, just a point of fact, the chamber is not a contractor. The chamber is a named entity within the ordinance establishing the program. I think it's an important distinction to make. I'd also note that the BIA is not our primary source of revenue. It is an important source of revenue, but not the only, and it is directly spent on marketing this community.
And we do have a professional services agreement for services. But that's it, yeah.
Yeah, and the section 6-56.290 authorized uses talks quite extensively about that, and that's in the ordinance as well. And as you know, Mr. Fraser, well, appreciate your comments. You cannot comment, but your comments have been noted on today's meeting. All right, so moving on to item 5.2, Business Center Rosa report.
That's me.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Janelle.
Everyone,
Welcome.
hello, everyone. But yeah, Janelle Myers. I've been overseeing Visit Santa Rosa since September or August of last year. This is my first meeting, so excited to be here. And yeah, we've been we just hit the ground running, and we've hired 2 new people, Lindsay Musco and Chelsea Wood. Lindsay's on the call right now, and then we still have Tanya over at the Welcome Center. So yeah, we've just been putting together our media and PR strategies and marketing plan for this year. Met with the advisory committee a couple of weeks ago and been talking to each of them individually. Todd, one of them, we spoke earlier this week, just trying to get input about how we utilize that committee to solicit input about how we market Santa Rosa as a destination going forward, and how we might change it a little bit. And then, yeah, we're looking into ways that we can work more closely with out there and work together on kind of utilizing each other's resources. We are undergoing a new website project that is set to launch later this year. So that'll be a very big project. And then, yeah, just lots of, we're doing a lot of social media focus, shooting a lot of video at our hotel partners, hospitality partners. We're doing a VR video, virtual reality video with the county grant for the Welcome Center. Super excited about that. And the Welcome Center is kind of undergoing a little refresh right now. The city is working on bathroom remodel to make it ADA compliant. It's a little bit of a disaster over there right now, but I'm excited to see how it looks in a couple months and we get the trolley program up and running. And yeah, so a lot of really exciting things ahead of us. A lot of work, but a lot of exciting things.
It's been a year, not less than a year.
Yeah, it's
Just a note on the application of the VR video that you mentioned. I think it's a pretty cool idea where you're coming into the Welcome Center and you're interested in a particular property, be it Safari West, the zip lines, whatever it might be, and you can watch a VR video of that location, right, to get a sense of,
So
this is.
yeah.
Yeah.
You can watch it from YouTube too.
okay.
But you can get a real sense of like, oh my God, there's a giraffe over there, and feel like you're really immersed in that experience and really hook you to then following through on a visit to that place. So I think it's a pretty cool upgrade in how we we have been using the Welcome Center and kind of bringing it into more modern times.
Yeah, and then one more thing that Peter doesn't quite know about, but I just started talking to Schultz Museum about doing like maybe a little pop-up in the back. They would also entice people to go to the museum and some more photo ops at the Welcome Center because people just love to take photos. So yeah, just fun little things like that that'll give it a fresh new look and entice people to experience, the great things that we have in Santa Rosa.
Well, I'm looking forward to, well, thank you so much for the report. I'm looking forward to the changes that are coming to the visitor center, including the back area with you'll be able to open that door in the back and such. And we're also very excited to have you on board working on these very important things to promote Santa Rosa as a destination. So very excited.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I think members of the, so since the item's done, does anyone from the, we're not making a motion, it was a discussion. Do we have any public comments or members of the public wishing to make a comment on this item?
Thank you.
Any members of the public in person, please raise your hand. Great. We have one person public who would like to make a comment. Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Eric Frazier again, and my address is truthintourism@gmail.com. The genesis of that address actually was born out of our observations about the visitor center. When we realized that the visitor count was totally overstated by a factor of about 10, we're like, oh my gosh, there's a huge problem in the accountability and veracity of information that comes from the chamber and the economic development department. And so Truth in Tourism was spawned, sort of a play on words off of truth in advertising, where again, as consumers, they want to know what the real deal is. So here we appreciate your report. And now it's clear to me it's not like the annual report that you do. It's just a standing item on the agenda. So thank you for that. The question, of course, is how much of that is devoted to promoting and understanding STR segments of hospitality? Before money from BIA was used antagonistically against STRs, omitted from the website, lack of understanding, no clarity. So that really is the question. I don't really see the cooperation. I don't feel the cooperation either organizationally in the BIA board or with the tourism money that's spent. Obviously, we can all appreciate the appropriateness of spending money for visitor education and comfort. It's going to be a lot of work to get 60,000 people going to the visitor center to match the claims on the chamber website. I don't know if virtual reality will do it, especially since you can see it on YouTube, but maybe something, I don't know. But thank you so much. Those are my comments. It's the same theme. Bogarting the STR segment is just not going to work in the end. And so we better reckon with it now while this seems open, become transparent, and everything would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any additional members of the public on Zoom who have questions, please raise your hand on Zoom. If there are any members of the public listening via telephone, press *9. Chair Rivera, there are no members of the public with further questions.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, that leads us to the end of our meeting. I do want to acknowledge Rosa again for coming in and talking about the board ordinance and city policy. Great summary. And thank you for bringing that back together here today. Unless there are any other questions from the board, I would like to now adjourn the meeting. Well, all right. Thank you all for coming. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.